I was told no blacks allowed in my own country.
No blacks allowed is what our good sis was told in Zambia, Africa. I I honestly don't have the words to describe how this makes me feel because we talk about racism outside of Africa, and people will tell you, well, that's not your country, that's not your continent. What did you expect? Majority of the people there are white people, that's their country, blah, 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 blah. That's what we hear, right? When you hear stories like this, in Africa, it's infuriating because what do you mean by no blacks allowed? Africa is home of the blacks. This is our home. Anywhere that you're gonna go to, as long as it's in Africa, you are allowed as a black person. But this is the story of our sister Rachel. Watch this clip, we'll come back and discuss.
I was told no blacks allowed in my own country. Let's talk about it. If you follow us on Facebook or YouTube, you've probably seen the video where I shared about my childhood home. I grew up in, born and raised, really remember running. And because I like to keep a positive attitude and outlook on things, I wasn't gonna share, but I think it's also important because it's part of the story. I value the importance of people's privacy, especially when you have a camera. I always asked before I turn on my camera if people were comfortable in being in my video. Let me tell you, these guys did not even give us the chance to ask. They just sent their guard and said, no black people here. As much as it pinched, there's something healing about seeing that place. Every trip I've gone to Zambia, I always go there. As I had mentioned in the video, that is the last house where we live with my mom, and that's where her funeral was. So with tears in my eyes leaving there, I made it a point to go and find who the owner was. I should probably mention that the guard had let us in without realizing who we were, so we were already in the yard. When the lady who was saying the guard to tell us no blacks allowed before we got out of the car, she made it seem like I was a criminal when I was approaching her. What we call flats in Zambia, here in the States they're called like a townhome community. Before we could leave, the other women, the other housewives in the other homes had come out. At this point, we were being watched like thieves, so we left immediately. And then I went to the owner's shop. He has a shop in town. It's actually named after the town. And I explained to him, I said, look, I don't live here, and every trip I've made here, even with my kids and my husband, knowing Gabe's skin color, maybe that's why they let us before. So I told him we've never had a problem just having a look around. We're not asking to go in or anything. You guys, I wasn't even finished asking him, and he says, of course. When I went back to my country and I went to see where my dad grew up, I went and had a look at the place. So please come through at 5:30. So 5:30 comes and there's a new guard on shift. And the new guard tells us the same thing. No blacks allowed. Proceeds to say, you got my other friend in trouble. At this point, both my brothers are like, we're putting these guys' jobs at risk. Let's just leave. So right when we start to back up, the owner's wife comes out, hostile. Why do you coming here? What do you want? What do you need? What can we do for you? So I let her know I had been to the store and spoken to her husband, and she immediately calls him. The irony in all this is that I do understand their language and I do understand what she's saying, and it's not very nice. On the phone call, her husband tells her to let us in, and she does. Tell me why when they hear about our social media following, the attitude completely changes. It's like, excuse me, where was this sweet, kind, gentle spirit a couple of minutes ago when we first got here? That is when that video you guys saw came to be. You'd think it had been like that the entire time, huh? It wasn't. And that is the story of how some communities feel like, and it's so different here in America, right? It's very different because it's a melting pot. But some communities in Africa feel like every African person is beneath them, and that is not fair, and it needs to change. So if you watch this video, if you know who I'm talking about, I would appreciate if you respect their privacy, but it needs to change. There needs to be some change. Don't accept people treating you any less than you are. And if you're on the other side, don't treat anyone less than they are, even if they work for you. Bye.
So as you heard, Rachel was actually going to that neighborhood because she used to live there before she left. I believe she lives outside of the country, and most of us do this. Like after years pass, we go back to our neighborhoods, our childhood memories mean something to us, so we go ahead and explore. That's what she tried to do. That literally, that's it. But apparently the owner's wife told her no blacks are allowed here. And this is in Zambia, in Africa, that we're talking about. But eventually, as you heard in her explanation, she went and talked to the husband, and the husband said she can, and the wife still refused, but eventually allowed her when she knew that she has a social media presence. I know we say our governments, and yes, the government should do something about it, but even as a society, you can't just sit back and watch this. You can't. And then you can't tell me that they're not respecting me. You demand respect. You're the one to create the boundary. Now, in Zambia, now that this lady shared this information, what are Zambians going to do about this? What is the government going to do about this? We can't just be complaining and crying about things without actually um, taking steps to rectify this, to communicate to these people that this is not right. We don't accept racism. We don't accept discrimination against our own people in our own country. Make it make sense. Anyways, fam, let me know down below what your thoughts are about this crazy story.